He said it while sipping coffee from my favorite mug, the one with the chipped rim and the faded sunflowers, as if he were commenting on the weather. "You're old, Patricia. You're getting in the way of our life." Daniel didn't even look up when he said it. Just leaned on the counter like a man explaining why he'd cancelled a cable subscription. Calm. Reasonable. Confident that I'd accept it the same way I accepted every other decision he and my daughter made lately. For a few seconds, I couldn't even breathe. The sound in the kitchen dimmed, like my body was trying to protect me from hearing any more. But those words, "you're getting in the way of our life," cut straight through anyway. The man I'd welcomed into my home. The man who used to call me Mom with that smooth Midwestern warmth that never sounded quite real. He was standing there, in my kitchen, drinking from my mug, and telling me I was no longer part of the life I'd built. It's strange how betrayal doesn't always hit like lightning. Sometimes it's slow, quiet, like water seeping through a ceiling you didn't notice was cracked. Months earlier, I still had my house. The old white Craftsman with green shutters on the edge of Lincoln. My husband and I bought it the year Sarah was born. Every inch of that place carried a piece of us, the dent in the stair railing from when she rode her tricycle indoors, the mark on the porch post where we measured her height every birthday, the faint smell of lemon oil that lingered from the furniture polish I'd used for decades. After my husband passed, that house became my anchor. I spent mornings on the porch swing with my coffee and my robe, listening to the cardinals. I tended to my rose bushes, made friends with the mailman, hosted my quilting group every other Thursday. It was quiet, but it was mine. Then one night, Sarah came by with a bottle of Merlot and her husband, Daniel. "Mom," she said gently, "you've got too much space here. You shouldn't have to shovel snow or climb stairs anymore. You deserve something easier." Daniel chimed in, his smile perfectly timed. "We can help you sell this place, get top dollar. You could move closer to us, maybe into one of those new single-level townhomes by the lake." I remember looking between them, wine glass trembling a little in my hand. "I don't mind the stairs," I said. "I've lived here 40 years. "Exactly," Daniel said, as if that proved his point. "It's time to enjoy your retirement, Patricia. Let us handle the logistics." That's how he always said it, logistics. Not money. Not ownership. Logistics. And slowly, over the next few months, they wore me down. Little comments, always polite, always practical. "Mom, the porch needs work. That's expensive." "Mom, you shouldn't be mowing that lawn yourself." "Mom, wouldn't it be nice to be closer to the grandkids?" They made it sound like love. And I wanted to believe them. The day I signed the papers, Sarah hugged me so tightly I could smell her lavender shampoo. "It's the right move, Mom," she said. "You'll be so much happier." Daniel handled everything, the listing, the sale, even the transfer paperwork. He said he'd found a great buyer. I didn't ask questions. I trusted them. I told myself it was just a house. But the night I locked the front door for the last time, I sat in my car for almost an hour staring at the porch light flickering in the wind. My husband had installed that light himself. He said it was so I'd never come home to darkness. Funny how quickly the dark found me anyway. When the sale went through, Daniel said there was a small delay with my new home purchase. "Just come stay with us a bit, Mom," Sarah insisted. "It'll be fun. Family breakfasts again." So I moved into their guest room. At first, it wasn't awful. The grandkids were happy to see me. I helped pack lunches, did laundry, baked on weekends. I told myself it was temporary. But weeks turned into months. I stopped hearing about the new house. My mail started coming to their address. Daniel said he was streamlining my accounts so he could handle the property sale proceeds until the next purchase was finalized. "Less paperwork for you," he said. "You should be relaxing, not worrying about numbers." He took my kindness for ignorance. I started noticing how Sarah flinched whenever I mentioned money. Or how she'd quickly change the subject when I asked if she'd found any listings. Still, I stayed quiet. You don't want to believe your own child is lying to you. The middle of it all, the moment that changed everything, came on a Wednesday morning. I was upstairs folding laundry, the smell of detergent warm in the air. Below me, I could hear them talking through the vent. I wasn't trying to listen, it just happened. "She's not going anywhere," Sarah said, her voice hushed but firm. Daniel laughed. "No, she isn't. That money's long gone. Unless she wants to live in a senior complex next to the freeway, she's stuck." "Do you think she suspects anything?" "Not a chance. She still thinks we're setting things up for her. As long as she believes she's part of the plan, we're fine." I froze with a towel half folded in my hands. My stomach dropped so hard it felt like falling. Sarah. My little girl. They weren't helping me. They were using me. I stood there listening, heart pounding so loud I worried they'd hear it through the vent. I couldn't make out the rest, only Daniel's chuckle and the clink of coffee cups. That sound, that casual, shared laughter, burned deeper than any insult could have. I didn't confront them right away. Part of me couldn't. I told myself I must have misheard. That maybe there was some misunderstanding. But the truth was sitting right in my gut, heavy as stone. I started looking around differently after that. Little things I'd ignored before. My jewelry box was missing a ring. My checking account balance looked smaller than I remembered. The mail pile never seemed to include my bank statements anymore. Sarah had even changed the Wi-Fi password to make it easier for the kids. All these tiny signs that I was being shut out of my own life. Then came that morning in the kitchen. I had asked about the money again, trying to sound casual. "Daniel, when will we be moving forward on the new house?" He set down his coffee, leaned back against the counter, and smiled that practiced real estate smile, the kind that hides more than it says. "Look," he said, voice smooth, "you're old, Patricia. You're getting in the way of our life. You had your time. You need to let us take care of things now." My first thought wasn't anger. It was disbelief. Then a strange calm settled over me. "Take care of things with my money?" I asked quietly. He shrugged. "You're overreacting." Sarah didn't look at me. She just kept stirring her tea. Her silence was the loudest thing in that room. That's when something in me broke, but not the way he expected. Not into pieces. It broke open. That night, I sat alone on the back porch while they watched TV inside. The air smelled like cut grass and rain. The sound of distant train whistles carried across the cornfields, steady and mournful. It reminded me of my husband, Richard, and how he used to say, "Never let anyone box you in, Patty. You weren't built to be small." I looked down at my hands. They were older now, thinner, lined. But they were still mine. The same hands that built a home, raised a daughter, buried a husband. Daniel thought old meant finished. He had no idea what kind of woman he just cornered. Later that night, Sarah slipped into my room. She didn't knock. "Mom," she whispered, "please don't make this harder. Daniel just wants what's best for all of us." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw someone I didn't recognize. Her face was calm, but her eyes darted everywhere except mine. "You took my house, Sarah," I said softly. "Where's the money?" She froze. Then she said the thing that truly broke me. "It's not your house anymore." She left before I could respond. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the shadows on the wall, and realized I wasn't grieving a house or even the money. I was grieving my daughter. The girl who used to run barefoot across that porch with a popsicle in her hand was gone. And in her place stood someone who could watch her husband rob her own mother and call it helping. By the time the sun came up, the grief had burned away. What was left wasn't anger, not yet. It was clarity. I packed a small bag that morning and stepped out onto the porch, their porch, technically, but the earth beneath it still belonged to me. I could feel it. The sky stretched wide and pale over the cornfields. The air smelled like something beginning. I thought about the man in my kitchen calling me old. I thought about my daughter's silence. I thought about the promise they made to help me start fresh. And then I smiled, just a little. Because I realized they were right about one thing. I was going to start fresh. Just not in the way they imagined. I didn't go downstairs the next morning. Not for breakfast, not for coffee, not for anything. I just sat on the edge of the bed, hands clasped tight, listening to the muffled sounds of their routine below. The clink of mugs, the squeal of the toaster, the half-playful tone Daniel used when he called for the kids. From above, it sounded almost domestic, almost sweet. If you didn't know what I knew, you'd think it was a happy home. But every sound felt sharp now, too clean, too rehearsed. Like actors in a play pretending life was normal. No one knocked on my door. Not even Sarah. I stayed there until noon, staring at the packed boxes along the wall. They'd told me those were just temporary, for when we moved into my new home. But I saw the dust collecting on the flaps now. I realized they hadn't been touched in weeks. That was the first moment it sank in that I wasn't part of their life anymore, I was part of their plan. Around 2 in the afternoon, I finally slipped out while they were gone. I walked down the cracked sidewalk, coat zipped to my chin even though the spring air was mild. There was a diner 3 blocks over, the same one Richard and I used to go to on Sundays after church. I hadn't been back since he passed. The moment I stepped inside, the smell hit me, bacon grease and coffee, mixed with that faint sweetness of syrup that never really leaves a place like that. The waitress recognized me but couldn't place from where. I just smiled, sat in the back booth, and ordered coffee I didn't drink. I sat there for hours, staring at the traffic light outside the window, watching cars stop and go, people live their lives. Everyone looked like they had somewhere to be. I realized how long it had been since I'd felt that way. When I finally stood, my legs stiff, I left cash under the mug and walked across the street to the library. The computers hummed quietly, the same way they used to when I'd bring Sarah there as a little girl to pick out summer reading books. The memory hurt. But it also helped me think. I logged into an old email account, one Sarah didn't know existed, and wrote a single message. "Eleanor, do you still have that guest room?" She replied in less than 5 minutes, "It's yours. Come whenever you need." That was the first time I'd felt real warmth in weeks. I didn't tell Sarah or Daniel I was leaving. I didn't pack the suitcases Daniel had so kindly labeled for me in the garage. I just grabbed my handbag, my folder with the house deed, and one old photo of Richard, the one where he's painting the porch steps, looking up and grinning because I'd just spilled lemonade on the grass. I tucked it between the pages of a book and walked out. I didn't even close the door behind me. Eleanor's home was small but alive, lace curtains, the faint smell of cinnamon and old paperback glue. She didn't ask questions when she opened the door and saw my face. Just said, "You hungry?" and started frying eggs. For the first few days, I barely spoke. I slept a lot. Ate when she put food in front of me. Sat on her porch and listened to the wind moving through the trees. She didn't push. That's the kind of friend Eleanor is. She's known me since Sarah was in kindergarten, she's seen my good years, my bad ones, and now, whatever this was. People assumed I was still at Sarah's. I didn't correct them. I stopped going to church. I didn't answer calls. I let everyone think I'd simply grown tired, like so many women my age do, fading into quiet corners when the noise of younger lives grows too loud. But I wasn't fading. I was waiting. It was 2 weeks before I finally told Eleanor the truth. She listened in silence, her hands folded on the table, her eyes soft but fierce. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "You know, Pat, I've heard of people losing houses before. I've just never heard of them smiling about it afterward." I smiled faintly. "Who said I'm smiling?" She poured more tea. "You're not crying either." "I think I did that already," I said quietly. "For 40 years. Days passed quietly, but my thoughts didn't. I started walking every morning, to clear my head, to feel something that wasn't bitterness. I'd walk down to the farmer's market, smell the peaches, watch strangers haggle over tomatoes. They looked happy. I wondered if they'd ever had their lives stolen piece by someone they loved. One afternoon, I bumped into a woman from church, Anita. She clutched her tote bag and smiled wide when she saw me. "Patricia." "Well, we thought you'd gone down to Florida to live with Sarah and her husband." That's what she said at Bible study. I felt my stomach tighten. "Florida?" "Oh yes," Anita said cheerfully. "She said you sold the old place and they were helping you move to one of those fancy retirement communities down there. She even said you gave her permission to handle your estate paperwork while you transition. Isn't that wonderful of her?" I could actually feel my pulse thudding in my temples. "That's something," I managed. Anita patted my arm. "You raised such a generous girl." When I got back to Eleanor's, I sat at her kitchen table for almost an hour without moving. Sarah wasn't just stealing from me, she was rewriting me. Turning me into a story that made her look like a saint. That night, I called my bank. I didn't speak to anyone directly, I just listened to the automated balance readout, and it was lower than I remembered. A lot lower. By week 3, I started going online again. I used Eleanor's laptop and checked Daniel's business page. He'd posted photos of himself standing in front of new properties, smiling in crisp shirts, holding sold signs. There was even a picture of him and Sarah in front of a luxury SUV with a caption, "Hard work pays off. Blessed beyond measure." I stared at that picture until my eyes burned. The SUV was the same color as the one Richard and I had once talked about buying when we retired. He used to say, "You'll drive, Patty. You're better with directions." The comments under their post were full of hearts and praise. Power couple. Such an inspiration. If they only knew. Eleanor found me still at the laptop hours later. "You're torturing yourself," she said softly. "I'm reminding myself," I replied. "Of who I'm dealing with." A few days later, I went into town to clear my head. On the way back, I took a detour. My old street. I told myself I just wanted to see it once, from a distance. But as I turned the corner, I saw cars lining the block, people, laughter, music. Daniel's voice carried over the hedge. He was hosting a barbecue. On my lawn. I slowed down, heart pounding. There were balloons tied to the porch, my porch, and a big banner that read New Beginnings Realty, Community Open House. I saw Sarah in a sundress, smiling, handing out drinks like the perfect hostess. Daniel clapped a man on the back, laughing too loud. And then, like something out of a dream, I saw him lift a spatula and flip burgers on the same grill Richard had built from scratch 25 years ago. The one I used to polish every spring. I stepped back behind a tree before anyone noticed me. I didn't cry. I didn't move. I just watched. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt something sharper, cleaner, something I hadn't felt in months. Control. That night, Sarah called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice breezy, casual. "It's been a while. The kids were asking about you. How are you?" "I'm fine," I said simply. She hesitated, just a second too long. "Daniel mentioned maybe we could come pick you up next weekend? Have dinner, maybe talk things through?" "Talk things through," I repeated. "About what, exactly?" Oh, Mom, come on. Let's not make this dramatic. You know we've just been trying to help. We all need to move forward. I leaned back in my chair, watching the sunset bleed through Eleanor's curtains. I see. Her voice softened. We just want you to be happy. Maybe it's time you let go of the past. You can't live alone forever, you know. That big house was too much for you. I'm not alone, I said. And I don't think the past is done with me yet. She laughed, light and dismissive. Oh, Mom. You always did get sentimental about things. Anyway, we should go. Daniel's clients are here. We'll talk soon, okay? I didn't answer. Love you, she added quickly, then hung up before I could respond. After that call, I sat in silence for a long time. Eleanor came out from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. She's fishing, she said simply. I know, I said. Eleanor poured herself a small glass of brandy, sat down across from me, and said, You going to let her reel you in? I shook my head. No, I said quietly. Not this time. The next morning, I dressed carefully. Jeans, cardigan, the soft blue scarf I'd bought at the thrift shop. I caught my reflection in the mirror, hair shorter now, eyes clearer. I took the folder with my house deed and bank documents, slipped it into my tote, and told Eleanor I was heading into town. She looked at me for a long time before nodding. Be smart, she said. And be patient. The law office was quiet, lined with old portraits and thick carpet. The attorney, a man named Thomas Langley, had kind eyes and a no-nonsense way of listening that made you feel like your story mattered. I told him everything. The house sale, the account transfers, the temporary move. The conversations. The documents I didn't fully read before signing. When I finished, he leaned back and said, If what you're saying is accurate, Mrs. Lewis, this wasn't just bad faith. It's fraud. The word felt heavy in the air. He explained that if Daniel and Sarah misrepresented the sale, if they promised one thing and did another, I could not only void the transaction, but recover the funds. You might get the property back, he said, and damages for the loss of equity. But we'll need documentation. I opened the folder, laid the papers on his desk, and said, I kept everything. He looked through them slowly, nodded once, and said, This will take time. But I can tell you one thing, they're not going to see this coming. That night, Eleanor made soup and set out 2 bowls on the table. When she handed me a spoon, she said, So what happens now? I looked at the steam curling from the bowl. Now I let them keep thinking they won. Eleanor smiled faintly. You always did have more steel than people gave you credit for. I smiled back, and for the first time since losing everything, it reached my eyes. They think I've moved on, I said. But they're about to learn I was the only thing holding their world together. The only reason I saw that email was because Daniel's assistant typed my name too fast and let autofill do the rest. That's what arrogance does, it makes people sloppy. It was a Tuesday morning, one of those gray Nebraska days where the sky just hangs there like a dirty sheet. I was sitting at Eleanor's kitchen table, sipping weak coffee and sorting through legal copies when the notification popped up. I almost didn't check it. The subject line just read Closing Prep P. Lewis, which could have been anything. But when I saw the sender's name, Marissa, the same assistant who'd once handed me a mug in Daniel's office and called me ma'am like I was someone's forgotten grandmother, I clicked. It was a short message. A casual note with a file attached. She'd meant to send it to the escrow officer, but thanks to email autofill, I got it instead. I knew right away she hadn't realized what she'd done. The email read, Here's the draft Daniel wanted for the relist. Please remove the old owner's name from the notes, he said there might be some heat coming from her direction soon. Want this closed before it's a problem. And attached was a draft real estate listing. My house. Again. For sale. Except this time I was nowhere on the documents. They were trying to sell it before the court could freeze the paperwork. Before the attorney finished building the fraud case. Before anyone could stop them. I didn't breathe for a second. Then I calmly downloaded the file, forwarded it to Thomas, my lawyer, and deleted the original message. But I didn't reply to Marissa. Let her wonder where it went. Let her sweat. That night, Eleanor made chicken soup, but I didn't eat much of it. I sat at the table staring at the curtain fluttering from the open window and said, "They're moving fast. Faster than we are." Eleanor poured herself a glass of wine and leaned against the counter. "That means they're nervous. That's when people mess up." I nodded. "He's not stupid, though. He's just confident no one will believe me. He's also used to women staying quiet," she added. "You've never been good at that." I let out the faintest smile. "I guess that's about to be a real problem for him." Over the next week, I changed my schedule. I got up earlier. Spent more time downtown. Visited the courthouse again and asked a few innocent questions at the clerk's office. I told them I was researching property inheritance for my niece. They handed me a form I already had in triplicate. One afternoon, I took the long way home and passed by the house. It had been repainted. They'd covered the soft yellow Richard and I had picked together with some kind of sterile gray. The porch railing I'd sanded and repainted every spring was now a high-shine black, cold and modern. There was a for sale sign planted in the front yard like a flag. And then I saw Sarah, standing in the driveway, clipboard in hand, talking to a young couple with a baby. She smiled, nodded, pointed at the flower beds I had once spent hours tending. She was describing my life like it was a stage prop. As they turned toward the house, I stepped back behind a parked SUV. My heart was thudding, not from fear, but fury. She had no business showing that house. It wasn't hers. And she knew it. The baby cried. Sarah made a cooing sound and said, "Oh, you'll love the nursery upstairs. We kept it just like my mother used to have it, very cozy, very vintage." I couldn't stop the breath that caught in my throat. She was selling my bedroom as a nursery now? Calling my life a marketing hook? She didn't even hesitate. Not a blink of guilt in her eyes. I stayed hidden until they went inside. And when I finally walked away, I didn't look back once. The next morning, I found a message from Thomas waiting in my inbox. He'd reviewed the forwarded email and attachments. His reply was short, but it said everything. "This is your smoking gun. We met in person that afternoon." He walked me through the next steps. The email would be used to request an injunction. It would trigger a deeper audit into the sale, the transfers, the false timeline Daniel had fed the title company. The fact that Sarah's name had appeared on a secondary account tied to my equity wasn't just suspicious anymore, it was damning. Thomas looked over the top of his glasses and said, "They're exposed now. It's just a matter of time." But we both knew it wasn't over. Not yet. 2 days later, I was picking up a prescription at the pharmacy when I heard someone call my name. "Patricia?" I turned and saw Bonnie Reynolds, an old friend of Sarah's. We hadn't spoken in years, but she'd always been kind to me. "I thought you were in Florida," she said brightly. "That's what Sarah told everyone. Said you moved into a senior resort down near Tampa." My chest went tight. "Oh?" I didn't realize she shared that. Bonnie laughed. "Oh, it was sweet. Said you were finally getting to enjoy life, water aerobics, shuffleboard, that kind of thing. She even brought cupcakes to church and said they were your recipe." I nodded slowly, trying to keep my expression neutral. Bonnie leaned in. "You know, she looked tired last Sunday. Eyes all puffy. When someone asked about you, she just said, 'Sometimes parents don't know when to let go.'" That hit like a slap. "Thanks, Bonnie," I said softly. "That's good to know." I walked out of the pharmacy and sat in my car for a long time, hands on the wheel, the engine off. Sarah wasn't just lying. She was trying to erase me, rewrite the story in her image. And people were believing her. The following day, Eleanor and I stopped for gas on our way back from the bank. I went inside to pay, and on my way out, I heard a familiar voice behind me at pump 6. It was Daniel. Laughing on the phone. Loud enough for everyone to hear. "She'll fold," he said. "She doesn't have the fight in her anymore. It's just paperwork. Once the new sale clears, it's done." He didn't even glance in my direction. I ducked back into the store before he saw me, heart hammering. I waited there until he drove off. The gas clerk gave me a funny look. I just nodded and bought a pack of mints I didn't need. When I got back to the car, Eleanor looked at me and said, "You okay?" "He's confident," I replied. "Good," she said. "Let him be." That night, my phone rang. Private number. I answered. "Mom?" Her voice was quiet, strained. "Sarah," I said flatly. I don't know what you've been doing, but I think we need to talk." "You mean what you and Daniel have been doing?" She paused. "That email, you weren't supposed to see that. So you admit it." "It's not what you think," she said quickly. "Daniel said it was just a draft. He's been handling all of it. I didn't read everything before signing. I trusted." "Stop," I said. "You signed everything. You benefited from it. You stood in my driveway and sold the garden I planted as a bullet point. I didn't mean. You called me a burden. You let people think I was off somewhere playing shuffleboard like I died already. Mom, I was trying to protect you." "No, you were trying to protect your lifestyle. And you gambled that I wouldn't fight back." She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "So what happens now?" "You'll find out," I said. "Soon." I met with Thomas the next morning. We filed the full lawsuit. Fraud, misrepresentation, civil theft. The injunction would freeze the property. The court would order a hold on Daniel's business accounts connected to the sale. And Sarah, sweet Sarah, would be subpoenaed to testify under oath about what she knew and when. The documents were delivered the following Tuesday. I didn't go with the courier. I didn't need to. But I sat on Eleanor's porch with my coffee that morning, waiting for the moment the phone would ring. It didn't. Instead, I got a knock at the door. Eleanor opened it, and there was Macy, Sarah's old friend, looking pale and anxious. "I just came from the office," she said, her voice rushed. Daniel was red in the face, yelling about a freeze. Sarah was crying. "It was bad. Really bad." "What happened?" I stood, slowly, and said, "They got a reminder that I exist. That afternoon, I took a walk past my old house one last time. The for sale sign was gone. The shutters I painted had been taken down. The porch was empty." I didn't cry. I just looked at it and thought, this used to be where I lived. But it's not home anymore. Then I turned, walked back into town, and stopped at the bakery to buy Eleanor her favorite scones. When I handed them to her, she looked at me like she knew what had happened. "They get the papers?" she asked. "They did. And? They thought I was irrelevant." She raised an eyebrow. "Were you?" I shook my head, smiling faintly. "No," I said. "I was the storm they forgot was coming." Daniel was mid-sentence when his voice cracked, not loud, but just enough that anyone listening closely could hear the panic beginning to creep in. "This isn't what it looks like," he said, holding the stack of papers with fingers that now fumbled ever so slightly. "This must be some kind of clerical mistake." The banker across from him, a silver-haired woman in a navy pantsuit, didn't even blink. She slid the documents back across the table like she'd done this before, like men like him weren't anything new. The accounts are frozen, she said calmly. Court ordered. Any attempt to withdraw funds, move assets, or initiate sale will be flagged until the fraud case is resolved. This property was already transferred, he snapped, still smiling like a man who believed charm might bail him out. We've got contracts, dates, signatures. The court has determined the original deed was signed under false pretenses by a misled seller, she cut in. That makes the sale invalid. Which makes the money in escrow no longer yours to touch. Daniel's lips twitched, but he recovered, turned to Sarah, and said through his teeth, "You told me the paperwork was clean." She didn't answer. Not with words. Just a look, tight, pale, a flicker of fear behind her eyes. For once, she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at the walls closing in. I was seated on the bench just outside the office, facing the window where I could see everything unfold. I wasn't part of the meeting. I didn't need to be. But Thomas had invited me to witness it if I wanted to, and I did. I wanted to see it happen. Not hear about it secondhand. Not read a transcript. I wanted to be there, calmly sipping from a paper cup of lukewarm coffee while the man who called me irrelevant watched his empire start to rot from the inside. And then, as if on cue, Daniel stood up too fast, knocking his chair into the edge of the glass wall. He turned to the banker and said, "This isn't over. I'll get this reversed." The woman didn't even flinch. "You're free to pursue an appeal." He pushed through the door without meeting my eyes. But I stood as he passed, and for one brief second, our gazes locked. He opened his mouth to speak, maybe to sneer, maybe to threaten, but I beat him to it. "You're standing in a building I paid taxes on before you could tie your shoes." He stopped. "You want to know what it looks like when someone irrelevant wins?" I asked. "Take a look around." Daniel didn't answer. He just turned away and kept walking. Back at the house, my house, now legally and publicly again, I stood on the porch as the afternoon sun warmed the wood beneath my feet. I'd repainted the railing the same deep sage color Richard had loved. The hydrangeas were starting to recover. And Eleanor was inside unpacking a new set of tea towels she'd picked up at the farmer's market. We'd gotten the court's official ruling that morning, the deed was mine again. The sale voided. The house restored. The equity was still in flux, some of the money was gone, sure, but what mattered had been returned. Not just a house. My dignity. Eleanor stepped out and handed me a sandwich. "You didn't eat lunch." I took it, still staring at the garden. "I saw the way his face changed," I said. "When he realized no one in the room was going to save him." "I hope it sticks." "Oh, it will," I said. "People like him count on being the smartest in the room. That's the only thing keeping them from unraveling. Once they see the cracks, it eats them alive." 2 days later, the school board quietly removed Sarah from the PTO board. I didn't ask how I found out. Macy sent me a screenshot of the meeting notes with Sarah's name struck through, no explanation offered. But in a town like this, you don't need one. The rumors move faster than the facts. And the phrase "she stole her own mother's house" doesn't need a lot of clarification to land. Later that week, I was at the grocery store when I ran into Mrs. Dillard, who used to volunteer at the same library where I now taught gardening workshops. She looked at me with new eyes, not pitying, not curious. Respectful. "I saw your story in the paper," she said, squeezing my arm gently. "You did good." "I just kept my receipts," I said, giving her a small smile. "That's all." She winked. "That's more than most people do." The confrontation I hadn't planned came on a rainy Sunday. I'd just come in from covering the plants when I saw a familiar car pull into the driveway, the same silver sedan Sarah had driven since college, now a bit more dented and dull. I considered not answering the door. But then I saw her step out, clutching something in her hands, face drawn, hair pulled back like she hadn't had time to think about appearances. She looked up and met my eyes through the screen door. I opened it without a word. "Mom," she said softly. I stayed in the doorway. "You shouldn't be here." She held up a photo frame, an old one, from the living room shelf. It was the anniversary picture from Colorado, the one where Richard had his arm around me and we were both laughing like the world had stopped for just a second to let us breathe. "I thought you'd want this back," she said. I took the frame, but I didn't thank her. She shifted. "I know what I did." "I do." "But Daniel didn't forge my signature. Daniel didn't lie to my friends about Florida. Daniel didn't tell people I was in decline, like I was already halfway gone. I didn't know how to stop it," she said. "He said it would help us both. That you were tired. That you didn't want the responsibility anymore." "You believed that," I said flatly. "Because it was easier than asking me." Sarah's eyes filled, but I kept my voice even. "You looked me in the eye and called me a burden," I continued. "You sold me out for convenience and cash, and when it got ugly, you let him speak for you." "I was scared," she whispered. "You should be," I said, stepping back. "Because now you'll spend every holiday, every school event, every church gathering wondering who knows what you did, and how much they'll tell their kids about it." She stood there, shaking slightly. "I just wanted to say sorry." "I know," I said. "But I didn't need to hear it." I shut the door slowly. Not slammed. Not dramatically. Just firm enough to make it clear there wasn't anything else between us anymore. The restitution claim moved forward. Thomas called to say a settlement offer had been quietly proposed, not enough to match what was taken, but enough to hurt them. Their attorney didn't even try to argue. He knew what the judge had already said: this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was manipulation. And they'd lost. I didn't throw a party. I didn't announce it on Facebook. I didn't tell the ladies at book club, though a few of them winked when I walked in and offered to help clean up afterward like I always had. Instead, I spent the afternoon clearing out the closet Daniel once suggested I didn't need. In the back, I found a half-empty box labeled Mom's Things. Inside were loose photos, some dried lavender from Richard's memorial, and the ceramic dish Sarah made for me in 5th grade. I took it out, turned it over, and stared at the uneven lettering on the bottom: "Love you forever, Mama." I held it for a long time. Then I stood, walked to the porch, and placed it gently on the table next to my tea. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees and the shadows crept across the yard, I stood in the backyard with a garden spade in hand. The soil was soft from recent rain. I knelt down and dug a new spot for a hydrangea root I'd saved from the dead ones Daniel had let rot. A root is stubborn. Even when everything else goes quiet, it holds on, waits for the right moment to grow again. I placed it in the ground, covered it carefully, and stood up slow, brushing the dirt from my gloves. Inside, the lights glowed warm behind the curtains. Eleanor was setting out plates for tea, humming under her breath. A breeze carried the scent of earth and lilacs, and for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I felt whole again. They thought they erased me. All they did was hand me a blank page. And I planted something new right on top of it.